Tell me why it would be a bad idea for the Montreal Canadiens to just keep on adding Russians. Let's talk today about a former top prospect in the 2022 NHL Entry Draft, a guy who made headlines back in the day as Matvei Michkov's second-in-command in earlier Russian tournaments internationally. Today, we're talking about Ivan Miroshnichenko. And I know that might sound like a mouthful. I mean, it literally is. It's one of the longest last names of prospects available to talk about. But today we're talking about Miroshnichenko and the idea of the Montreal Canadiens going after this guy, and an article posted by Gabriel Sammy that describes why this could make sense. Here's why former first-round pick Miroshnichenko could be Kent Hughes' next calculated gamble. You have yourselves, ultimately, PM's NHL Draft ranking, who went out there and talked about this idea. You see, they've been posting prospect news for years and years and years. They have a lot of interesting breakdowns and prospect info. This is a comment made by PM's NHL Draft ranking back in 2021. Take a look at this. NHL teams should make sure to do their homework on this guy. If a team can somehow draft Miroshnichenko late and bring him over to North America, I believe that he could very well become the steal of the 2022 draft. His best game is at the very top of this crop. He is elite. Now, that was from 5 years ago. Earlier this year, PM went out there and responded saying, hey, I've seen Miroshnichenko's name being thrown around. If he is available at a reasonable price, you pounce. The upside is still at least a power winger who can chip in 15 to 20 goals with opportunity, with room for more. I'm looking at you, Montreal Canadiens. Hashtag go Habs go. Now, this is a really interesting idea and a guy that I personally would be willing to take a shot at if I were the Montreal Canadiens. Never mind the fact that Russians seem to be a pretty hot commodity in Montreal these days, between Ivan Demidov to Alexander Zhuravsky, Gleb Pugachev, and potentially Miroshnichenko too. What's one more to entice the Russian population into coming over to the Habs? Miroshnichenko was 22 years old, 6'1", 194, a right-handed left-wing player who was initially drafted in the 20th overall spot in the 2022 draft by Washington. Earlier in his draft-eligible career, you had yourselves various international tournaments where Miroshnichenko was super dominant, skating alongside of other names like Matvei Michkov. These guys absolutely tortured the U16 Russian squad in 2019-20. And heading over into the World Under-18s, Michkov was also a top producer. Miroshnichenko was included on that team as well in 2021. Miroshnichenko, I remember it was the Young Olympic Games in 2019-20, where he absolutely tore up the competition alongside of Matvei Michkov. And if I'm not mistaken, there were some really interesting North American prospects also in that tournament too. Isaac Howard, Frank Nazar, Nate Danielson, Rutger McGroarty, Adam Fantilli. Miroshnichenko and Michkov were the two guys at the very top of the crop who produced like crazy and who made themselves known as top-tier prospects. Miroshnichenko went through some pretty unfortunate development because later in his draft career, this guy ended up getting diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. This was diagnosed right before the 2022 NHL Entry Draft, and as a result, when the Washington Capitals selected him, there were already some questions as to the health status of Miroshnichenko long-term. However, he successfully overcame Hodgkin's lymphoma, which, if you're paying attention here, it's a form of cancer affecting the lymphatic system. Miroshnichenko was literally a cancer survivor. And seeing him get back into a National Hockey League sweater, playing 21 games with the Caps in 23-24, 18 games with the Caps in 24-25, and 13 games in 2025-2026, all whilst producing heavy production in the AHL. This is a very clear player that does have the talent to play pro hockey in North America. The question is, though, what's the ceiling level at the National Hockey League level? I mean, you look at the overall production, he doesn't have the best NHL numbers, 13 points in 52 games spread across 3 seasons, but his AHL production is legitimately great. He produces in the playoffs, he has been a clutch player for the Hershey Bears, and now, thinking about his future, I mean, PM's NHL draft ranking is saying that the Montreal Canadiens could stand to take this kind of a player on. Some of the replies go out there and say, hey, Miroshnichenko was clearly available because he needs to pass by waivers this year, and Washington, they're stacked on the wing. That's a pretty big element to the conversation when you talk about what options the Caps have with Miroshnichenko. Just look at the additions that they made this previous offseason. Jordan Kyrou, Alex Tuch, those are really, really great names, not to mention Boone Jenner. You added an entire line's worth of legitimate middle to top 6 caliber forwards alongside of everybody else. Just look at this winger core. Tuch, Kyrou, Protas, Wilson, Ovechkin, Leonard, Protas, and Beauvillier. Yeah, you got 2 Protases over there. They're both pretty good. Alex Ovechkin is Alex Ovechkin. Tuch and Kyrou can add some really good depth on the wing there too. Where's the room for Miroshnichenko? Especially if this guy is going to need waivers this upcoming season, the Capitals might want to trade him away, just get something for him, rather than risk losing him out for nothing if they don't deem him good enough to overtake a Beauvillier or an Ilya Protas or something in the lineup. It's going to be tough to crack this Washington Capitals forward core. So for Miroshnichenko, is there an opportunity for this guy to come over to a team like Montreal and get the absolute best playmaking possible from Ivan Demidov? We've already seen in the past what Miroshnichenko is capable of when he plays with super talented Russian forwards. I'm thinking that Matvei Mishkov connection, these guys were dynamite together. I'm not saying that Mishkov is Demidov, but those guys are kind of in the same boat talent-wise. So if Miroshnichenko worked really well with Mishkov, who's to say he wouldn't work out with Demidov too? I'd think it's a pretty reasonable thing to go out there and try to look at. And for the Canadiens, who's to say that he is necessarily going to be any worse than a Zachary Bolduc or something else like that? I get that you need players to fill out the middle to bottom parts of your lineup, but ultimately, Texier, Bolduc, these guys are decent enough that you can throw them onto your bottom 6 and just not really care all too much. You would prefer to see a lot of players reach their potential, of course, but I'd argue that Miroshnichenko has a higher ceiling at this point than some of these other dudes. But that's just me. I'm super high on Miroshnichenko, have been for years, even especially when you consider the cancer that he had gone through. He's 22 years old. Zachary Bolduc is 23, so maybe if you wanted to think about Bolduc and his track record of NHL success already, that maybe puts him above Miroshnichenko, but I do think as well, the idea of Miroshnichenko with Demidov, that sounds like a really good idea in my brain. Add on Pugachev, add on Jurovsky, and it's like, there's a new Russian Revolution coming in Montreal. That would be really interesting. You can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about PM at NHL Draft Rankings? Thought that Miroshnichenko should be a Canadian? Thoughts in the comment section down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.